Hey, everybody. Thank you for joining me this evening. I'm glad to have you in the house. Night, uh, to have a interview and have people come on and just have a nice conversation. I am in a happy, jovial mood today. Today was my first day out of my 14-day quarantine. So I worked past it. I got through it. I'm back out into the open and I'm back into society. So, man, seeing the sunshine that was out today felt like, man, I had a real good day, and I got to see my family when I got home. So everything has been super awesome today, and I'm just glad that everybody's here joining along as well, coming on the show and just following me along today, man. I don't know what to tell you. I'm just in a really good mood. So, um, just real quick, everybody, before I get into introducing the guests, guys, if you're hopping on for the first time or if you're a regular follow, man, hey, do us a favor, check us out on our social media, or you can go to our new website. Our website address is www.madefromscratchpodcast.com. You can go find the live feed there for the show. You can set up our new internet radio station there as well. You can go check out past episodes. We're setting up live podcasts on there, looking for other DJs to put on the show. So that's kind of becoming interactive as well. And then, of course, you can go to our website to find past episodes of our podcast as well. We take the audio from the shows and we put them into a podcast form. So you can go find those there. And there's a link to Spotify where you can catch all the past episodes if you want to hear them. Or you can go to our YouTube channel, catch all the past episodes there. Or you can catch the live stream there as well. You can catch it on Facebook, Twitter, and on the website now. So you can have a multitude of options to go see where you can watch the show. Drop your comments in there. If you're watching us on YouTube, do us a favor, hit the like and subscribe button. We are trying to build our viewership there. That way it allows us to do a little bit more creative things with with our channel. And you got to build up viewers, of course, to be able to do these things. But so that's why I try to push everybody to go to our YouTube channel. Just hit the like and subscribe button. Go check out some of our past episodes, some of our past guests. We've had musicians, writers, lots of interesting people on. So, man, I really appreciate if you would go check it out. And again, thank you for hopping on, just coming on the show with us and following along. So, let me jump into this evening's guest and kind of tell you about the gentleman I'm about to introduce you guys. So, he is a USA Today best-selling author. He's written books that actually that he's I'm slipping my mind. It's going crazy right now. But anyway, he's I'll let him kind of tell you about his works, a lot of the novels that he's written, because he's got different genres. He's done science fiction, he's done dark fantasy, he's done a few other things, but he also he's written two nonfiction books that are kind of interesting to me, because both of them are just about how you can become a creative person. So one of them is called How to Build Your Creative Career, and then the other one's How to Become a Successful Author, which again, I'm learning to become an author as well. And that's why it kind of interests me whenever I saw him and really looked into Russell Nolan. Nolan is his, Nolte is his name. Excuse me. I'm sorry about that. I apologize, Russell. He also does a podcast as well called The Complete Creative, which he interviews other creators, writers, artists, in an attempt to help them build better businesses. So, he's got quite a bit of log of episodes that he's done. So, if you want to check him out, you can also check out his website, right? And let me pull that up for you guys can see where his website, right? You can go, where are you at? I'll pull up his website right here. It's www.russell, that's RussellNohelty.com. You can find links to his books, his podcast, and you can check out how he's a really cool dude, very interesting. So, without any further ado, guys, let me introduce you to Russell.
How you doing today?
How you doing, sir? How's everything going?
It's going great. How's it going with you? Happy to be here.
Yes, thank you for hopping on. So, um, just to brief, me and Russell were having a kind of pre-interview talk a little bit about things, and a lot of the things that we were talking about, again, this was some of the things that I really found interesting about him because he's got over 20 books that he's written, and then on top of that, he's got his two nonfiction books, which I've actually went on Amazon and purchased one because I wanted to start reading it once I saw it, and it's how to become an author because I'm learning to I'm trying to publish myself. So, and then somebody's got as much work as you done, I would kind of take that kind of advice and say, hey, he's the USA bestselling, bestselling author, USA Today bestselling author. God, I got to check that out. So, yeah, I've purchased that online. I'm gonna start reading that actually after I get off the show. So, but another thing that I found interesting about Russell is he does a podcast. So, just real quick, let me go ahead and start getting into the questions, and we'll dive in a little bit more about his podcasting and his books. But one of the first things that I usually like to ask people that come on, since you're a writer, how did you start your career um, in writing? Because everybody's journey starts out a little bit different when they get into writing. So how did you start yours?
Sure. So, I guess going back this past Christmas, my mom showed me writing that I've done since I was like a kid.
Oh
Like
wow.
in the local paper and such, but I never really wanted to be a writer. I wanted to be a director and a cinematographer and editor and make independent movies. That's the thing that I've wanted to do since I was in high school. Um, and so that was sort of I went to the University of Maryland and I got a degree in broadcast journalism and another one in sociology. And I started doing shooting and I directed independent movie and TV shows and all sorts of stuff. I edited a bunch of short films
Yeah.
and but that all requires a whole bunch of people
Yeah.
to make happen. So in 2008, I got into a car accident that left me in a neck brace for about 6 months.
Oh
And
wow.
during that time, I couldn't shoot. I was also a fashion photographer, and I couldn't do anything. I kind of had to give up photography altogether because my back just was not having it. But while I was doing that, the only thing I could do was write. So every day, I would write a little bit, and I'd write a little bit more, and I'd write a little bit more, and I ended up after that 6 months with a bunch of TV show scripts, a bunch of movie scripts, and it just happened fortuitously that my wife and I both found ourselves without jobs in June of that year, and we moved out to LA. It's something I'd always wanted to do, so we moved from DC to LA. And since then, I started pursuing really heavily film and TV work, and after a couple of years, my manager at the time introduced me to comics. I hadn't read comics in a long time. And she introduced me to all the cool things that people were doing with horror and sci-fi and fantasy independent comics. And I realized that I could make them without a whole bunch of people. It would be just me and an artist working together. So I started making comics, and that led to writing books, and that led to me getting a couple of publishing deals, and then that led to me kind of seeing behind the scenes of how publishing works, and not being super enamored with any of the ways that the publishers were publishing my work. So I pulled back all the rights, and I launched my own publishing company. And then I went full time about a year after I launched the publishing company, and I've been writing and publishing ever since.
Awesome, man. So you've had quite a track to get to writing. Again, because I was kind of like you when I first started wanting to figure it out. I threw my hand at screenwriting, and I don't know, I just wasn't really good at it. Um, I entered and then I even entered into a lot of contests and that sort of thing, just trying to find some kind of traction in it. And I never got anywhere, never placed in anything. So you know what? I still want to write though. So um, let me go ahead and start writing. So I just went ahead and start about a year ago. I said, let me start writing my book. And So I went ahead and started putting everything together, wrote the outline, started getting the characters in there, working on the story arc, and then finally I got it all together now, and I was actually to the point where um, I've actually finished it and sent it out to an editor. Come back, I got it back. I'm doing a few rewrites, just stuff that he suggested, because he was my content editor. So, once I finish that, I plan to have it out and have my first book ever done. And again, I never planned on becoming a writer. Again, my hopes were like kind of like yours, wanted to do film, screenwriting, that sort of thing, because that always interests me, seeing that sort of thing. And I guess sometimes we just got to make the choices that we got to make and say, hey, you know what, this kind of interests me, and let me go ahead and start doing that and just give it a shot and see where it takes me. So that's pretty awesome that you went through all that, and then having to move from DC to LA. How that had to be a pretty big trek, you know.
I mean, it's something that I always wanted to do. I'd wanted to move out to LA a couple of years earlier, but my wife was still in school, and then I had a job, and then she had a job, and it took a couple of years for all of those things to line up. I was an executive producer at an internet television company, and so there's just a whole bunch of reasons to like stay in DC for the time that I stayed in DC. But then when it was time to move, we actually did it pretty easily. We It seems crazy now, 11 or 12 years since we've moved out here,
Yeah,
but when we did it, it felt supernatural to like move across the country. And like I love LA. I loved LA from the first moment that I stepped off that train. In fact, that plane, I had a neck brace on that first time we came out for a scouting trip, and when I stepped out of LA, I literally came off the plane and like smelt the air, and I took the neck brace off, and I never had to wear it again. Like LA is home. I have none of the ill will that anyone else has to LA, and I honestly don't understand people that have ill will towards LA. I mean, it's got literally everything. It's got culture, it's got good weather,
right.
it's got awesome food, it's got awesome people. I mean, it's got some crappy people too, but like so does every city.
Yeah,
So
everywhere's got them. So yeah,
what I love about LA is it's the only place I've ever held a creative job where people didn't ask what do you really do.
do.
So
Yeah,
when I lived in DC, and I lived on the East Coast, and everywhere I would go, when I would tell people I was a writer or director or editor, they say, yeah, but what do you really do? And LA is the first place and only place I've ever lived where people say, when you tell them you have a real job, they ask you what you really do.
do.
So
Yeah,
so it's really is motivating to so one, it's really motivating because like everybody is on the hustle trying to do stuff, but it's also really motivating because like everybody is really good. Like when you're in other places, even New York, people were good, but it was not the level of LA. Like everybody in LA is like they're making their living, like they're producing real stuff. Like most of my friends out here like have real credits. Like
yeah,
they're like producing Disney movies and like working for Marvel and like all of these like incredible things, and so it like makes you up your game. I thought I was hot shit when I was in DC with my like little indie movie, and I come out here and I'm like, oh no,
yeah,
I like this is nothing. Like the quality, like for DC it was a very good quality
yeah,
movie, but for like LA it just shows you like where you are, and it forces you to raise the bar. And
yeah,
I'm somebody who I wouldn't say that I need to have that bar raised, but I definitely needed to see how
yeah,
I definitely needed to see the like what it like not I don't want to say competition because I don't think of anyone as my competition, but I had to see what the competition was like. I had to see what like the other people were. I had to see like what it really meant to like make something amazing, and like
yeah.
not just amazing to my friends, but amazing
To other
like
people,
to
yeah,
like on
yeah,
a massive scale. And then getting involved in that community, and going to places and being able to like get advice from from like real creators who were like doing it full time. Not that people that don't do it full time are not real creators, but like people who were like doing it at the highest level, and them
Yeah.
saying that sucks, that's good, that's interesting, and like really showing you like how to get from level 1 to level 5 to level 10 to level 100
Yeah.
really was like a masterclass in of itself. So
Yeah.
I really love that we came to LA now. I realize in retrospect how crazy it was that we did it, but I love that. I don't know. I love LA. I guess that's
Hey,
my
hey,
thesis.
yeah, hey, and no, to your point, right? Um, it's the big leagues, right? So, if you really want to go see what you are and you want to compete at the highest levels, you're going to go to the big league. You're going to go to the big leagues. You're going to go to the place where everything is, and that's you want to talk about entertainment. That's the center of the universe when it comes to it. Everything's created there, the ideas and everything, all that stuff comes from that one place. So yeah, that's pretty awesome that you actually found your way in there, and you're in that culture, and it's that's kind of something what I've yearned for as well. When you get to that point, you want to be around that culture and people who, when they talk about being creative, they mean being creative.
They mean being creative and like making
Making
something
it
that will
something.
be incredible, like something that will blow your mind. Like even the stuff that people don't put out or the stuff that's in pre-development is like just mind blowing. The stuff that you see doesn't get made, and that's almost as important as seeing what does get made. Just to be like, oh yeah, I have this thing going around. It's like this is incredible. They
Yeah.
say you surround yourself. You are the average of the 5 people you hang around with the most,
Yeah.
and
Mhm.
I don't. I think that's kind of flippant, but the truth is that like when someone's telling you that you can do something, and or someone's telling you can't do something, it molds you and it molds what you're able to do. But at the same time, if you are hanging out with people who are markedly better than you at the thing that you do, or that have been to the mountaintop and come back and can or are still on the mountaintop and can tell you and move you in the right direction, it's like it's really game changing, because you're thinking usually around wherever, like I lived in DC, so like I'm thinking of like the people I knew in DC, and I was like, okay, I know all of the people in DC, and I know like the level of the stuff that comes out of this community of people, and I thought that I like that was a good barometer of like what the top level was. But the truth is that there were a couple of people that were like on that top level. It's especially because of in documentaries, and there's this Discovery Channel is in Silver Springs, so like the
Yeah.
documentaries are huge, and like the people that are in documentaries are like literally playing at the top level, or doing reenactments or stuff. There's a lot of huge like reenactors. There's lots of second units that come out of DC, but when you're talking about like actually creative putting it together, you want to be judged against the best. You want to be up against the best. I just went to this podcasting convention a couple of months ago. 2 months ago, I guess. It feels like 10 years ago, but 2 months ago. And it was really eye opening again to be like, hey, my little podcast is good, but to see like how many people, like how serious the top level people were taking it
Yeah.
was like pretty incredible, because you're watching people like closing $1 million deals, or like talking about like owning a radio state, an internet collective that has 100 podcasts in it, and
Yeah.
like and making hundreds of millions of dollars a year, or tons of thousands of dollars a year, and you're like, oh man, like that's the level that I want to compete at. Like that's the
Yeah.
level that I want to judge myself at. And for me, it's not about like the monetization. I've always thought that monetization was like money was the byproduct of doing my job.
Yeah.
Was like doing if I did my job right, then money would be the ancillary byproduct. But
Yeah.
it was really quite something to just see what the real highest level meant, what like the highest level really was in this game. Just like when I was looking at like the highest level of film, because here's the thing: is you when you're not living in LA or around like that community of people that make this kind of stuff, it almost feels like they're these gods. They're like these not human people who like exist. Like I know that Psych does get made, but like it's being made by these humans out here in LA that like don't really exist on the same level as me, human.
Yeah.
And when you get to meet those people and see behind the scenes and see how just normal they are and how they conduct themselves, it kind of both shatters that illusion that like, oh no, like I can make this, like I actually can make it just will take me stepping up my game a huge amount till I get to their level. But these guys aren't mythical figures, they're just humans.
Yeah.
And so that really, that's why I think that judged by the 5 people you meet is both right and wrong. Like I do like I want to be surrounded by like the absolute best people that I can, so I can be judged against them and also have them like motivate me forward. But yeah, I did not realize that ancillary benefit of living in LA was just like the world, like to see the glass shatter
Yeah.
around me and be like, oh, this isn't like a dream. This is a job that people do, and
Yeah.
I just have to get much better to be able to do this job also.
Yeah, because you know, like you're saying, you go see podcasters at another level, right? You know, of course, you see Joe Rogan, and then there's like Mark Metry, you all these other podcasters that are really big, right? And you see the time and the effort and stuff that they put into work into getting these shows, and they're making millions of dollars off of them, right? Just off of really just conversation and having interviews and talking with people and seeing those things happen. You go, you know what? I really got to work at getting better at doing this if I really want to try to put myself out there and compete. And again, that's why like I love reaching out to people. I study people. I study those kind of people. Hey, let me find the upper echelon of what I want to do as a creative person, and let me learn and emulate their styles and see what I can take from them and add my own unique perspective to it. And you know, from there, throw it out there and see what I can create and see what I can make. So yeah, I'm kind of along the same lines and seeing, you know, that's why I'm barely getting my feet wet. So if I'm throwing myself into this now, and I've started doing this month and a half ago. So doing all this, all the media, learning all this, doing all the behind the scenes, creating a website, doing all this from scratch has started me driving forward, and that's where I want to be in a year from now, is going to the next big podcasting thing and going meeting those people and networking and seeing what the next level is, because there's always another level, right? There's always somebody out there doing it a little bit better. and
Mm-hmm.
and that's where you know, I like to compare myself that way, just because that's going to make me, like you've said, being around those kind of creatives in LA, right? They force you to step your game up and really work and say, okay, I got to do a little bit more. Let me find this way to be creative and really go do it instead of just talking about it. Um, you know, that's been part of the problem with a lot of people that I've had these kind of conversations with. Not on here, but I mean personal conversations. They're like, "Yeah, I want to do this," and I said, "Well, why aren't you?" Um, you know, just get moving, man. Uh, Start putting the foot forward. Start putting yourself out there. Again, doing video, doing whatever it is, because anybody can really jump into doing podcasting right now. They've made it so simple. So if you really want to do it, you want to go hop on, go. If you and you don't know exactly what you want to do, but you want to try to learn, go hop on Anchor. Anchor does it from your phone. You can go start there. Pretty simple. Get on there, start doing podcasting, start putting your material out there, and you again just start growing yourself and learning and start doing the work. Start finding the things, how to structure a podcast, how to create interviews, how to talk to people, how to network, how to do all these things, man. And because they're all the behind the scenes work that you get better at the longer you start doing this. the more you start doing it. So learn how to reach out to people, learning how to actually have a conversation, um, with somebody else besides a friend or a family member, and reaching out. So kind of like what we're doing here now, right? Um, we've never actually met in person or have had a conversation, but here we are. We're having a conversation. We're talking about podcasting, and then we're fixing to start talking. I'm fixing to jump into talking about your books and everything else. But again, here, this is the interesting part about it. You can literally create these lines and these forums now to go build your voice and go start building what you want to build. So if you want to go be a writer, if you want to go start creating movies, if you want to go start creating short films, man, upload them on YouTube. You never know. It's social media. It's a free way to just start putting it out there. And then from there, if people start showing interest, then start diving deeper into the work, because it's not it's not a sprint. It's a marathon about getting in here and start getting out there to people. And then at some point, if you take the risk like you did and leave from Washington to go to LA to go start pursuing what you wanted to do, you'll start seeing things open up, right? You start meeting that world, you start getting into that world, but you'll never know if you don't go there, right?
For
you never
sure.
take a chance. So again, that's why I'm a big proponent of, hey, if you're going to go do it, follow through, go do your dreams. That's why I said I had to write a book. I'm already planning on my second one. So, again, once you start doing one, then you start getting a little bit better at the formula, trying to figure out how you want to create, how to outline, how to do all these things, because there's so many tools out there that can help you. I mean, same thing with doing videos, or same thing with doing screenwriting. There's books and stuff, but you got to go study at it and see what you want to do. And if that's what you want to put your heart and soul into, go ahead and do it, man. I'm big ups to you, man. A big props that you've done what you've done. That's pretty awesome. So let me go ahead and ask you, let's go ahead and start jumping into your writing. So how would you define your style as a writer? And, who were some of the influences that, kind of led you into the direction that you're in your genre, or however you create your writing style?
So I guess I would call my writing style fantasy thriller.
Yeah.
Most of my influences come from movies and then from comics, because those were what I was working on and reading. So Brian K. Vaughan, who created Why the Last Man and then Saga, and people like Quentin Tarantino and Kevin Smith from movies, who I think are really good at writing dialogue, and then for books, people like Terry Pratchett and Neil Gaiman and God, I'm forgetting a whole bunch. Terry Brooks and but also people like Dan Brown, also, who writes these very fast movies. These fast movie feeling books.
Yeah.
So I kind of combined a whole bunch of styles. So, because I wrote movies and then comics and then books, I kind of combine the pacing and dialogue and characters. And I like to think that I've pulled the best parts from each. So movies and TV are great for structure. Comics also. Comics are incredibly visual, as are movies and TV. So you get really vivid imagery from them. And then books. Books, I think, are great for developing character and expounding on B stories and side stories. So each medium has its own positives and negatives, and I like to think that because I've written for everything, I can kind of pull the stuff that works best for any medium into whatever medium that I'm writing. But now having a career that spanned over so many formats allows me to kind of dip my toe into comics and novels and everything. So but if I had to define the best I've come up with is fantasy thriller with a bunch of mythology and monsters. The thing that I love is mythology. Like
Yeah.
that's the number one thing I think that is across 95% of my books
Yeah.
is something about mythology and monsters and fast paced action thriller stuff. That's not all my work, but it's a lot of it's the vast majority of my work, and it's almost all of my comics work. So
Yeah.
using my favorite mythology is demons and like hell, and most of my work takes place across either Greek, Roman, Judeo-Christian, or or Norse or Egyptian mythology. And there's always almost always like those kind of characters that you'll see in my books. So
Yeah, that's awesome though, because again, that's uh, you know, Hollywood pulls a lot of that inspiration and creates movies from books and comics. I mean, you saw one of the biggest was a comic, right? That Marvel turned into a big franchise, right? I mean, they literally grew a whole franchise off comics,
yeah, I
and
don't really care about that part of it, honestly. Like, my management team deals with my movie and TV stuff. I'm concerned with making the best comics in the format of comics and the best books in the format of books that I can. And anything that happens after that is a bonus. But I don't think you can't go into a medium expecting that
oh
to
no,
be moved to another medium. I mean, I've had a couple of things optioned, and obviously I've made my own stuff when it came down to it. But my goal is to give an amazing fantasy experience. If I wanted to sell stuff to Hollywood, I'd probably go to make psychological thrillers, contained thrillers are sort of like the bread and butter of what Hollywood buys from writers. They tend not to buy fantasy or sci-fi that much because it my books are quite high budget. There's often apocalypses and explosions, and it's a big budget thing.
yeah,
Whereas thrillers are usually in one location and are able to be done on a much more reasonable budget than generally my books. But we're out with a bunch of my stuff right now, or we were until the world burned down.
yeah,
But it's never the thought of the only thought that crosses my mind when I'm writing a book is how can I write the most amazing experience for these readers who are reading it and get the most out of it.
yeah. So, and again, you've it's not just about like you were saying, right? So you've also dove into writing two nonfiction books. So you wrote one, uh, how to build a creative career, and then you wrote a second one, that was how to become a successful author. So what were the stories behind those two? Why did you dive into writing nonfiction? That you since you most of your books are fiction.
Well, I had the podcast. So in 2016, I started my first podcast, The Business of Art, where I interviewed artists and creators about how they broke in. Basically, was how I was very concerned with how people broke into the industry and like the nascent stages of how they built their business. So it was very business focused. It was very it was very early career focused and how to puncture through that. And so I ran that. But before then, I'd been doing shows, a little bit of shows. And while I was doing the podcast, I did 150 conventions in 3 years.
Wow.
So between 2015 and 2017, I probably did 100 shows, and people would come up to me and ask me the same 10 or 12 questions.
Yeah.
And so between the podcast and then my own experience and conventions and reading hundreds of books about the subject, I feel like I had a pretty good breadth of sort of how to build a creative career. Because I have a degree in sociology,
Yeah.
my biggest thing I focus on is how groups of people operate. So what I'm mostly interested in is when you look across the spectrum of creativity from like writing to music to sculpture to dance
Yeah.
to comedy to magic. What are the things that transcend all of a specific medium and go and go and speak to everybody? That could be like a good overarching barometer of like what you probably will need. Now, I don't think How to Build Your Creative Career will be everyone will need it. Some people will never do live shows. Some people may not need every piece of the build an audience from scratch. But
Yeah.
basically, the show the that
But
book came about because I had done 2 years of research, just without intentionally doing research. I just had done research. I'd launched a bunch of products. I'd talked to a bunch of people that launch products. And so the show, that book is built in 5 sections. 1, how to make something great. 2, how to sort of build out a sales funnel and think about sales for a creative business.
yeah,
3,
of
how to
course.
build an audience from scratch. 4, how to sell at live events. And 5, how to launch products successfully. And those, some combination of those 5 are going to be present in everybody's career. If you're whether you're a podcaster or a writer or a musician, you're going to have to do live events at some point. Even if it's this kind of
Yeah.
live event where you're live, you're going to have to do something that relates to live events. You're going to have to create products. You're going to have customers to buy that product. You're going to have a streamlined sales funnel so you know how people are coming in and out of your system, and then you're going to have to make something great. So those are the 5 sort of sections that I broke down, and then I just took it from show to show to show, and sold that on my table for about a year, and people were kept asking me when I was going to do one specific to authors, and I kept saying, well, like, authors need all this stuff too. But then the more I thought about it, the more I realized that there are some very specific things that happen to authors that don't happen to other people, like Amazon, using Amazon Kindle, and certain kinds of marketing with BookBub ads, and certain ways you design. Even though every creative is going to need an idea, the way that we develop ideas for writing is different from how you develop an idea for music.
Hmm.
It's slightly different. So I realized that I had just a ton of writing on my website, The Complete Creative, dealing with authorship.
Yeah.
And so I pulled a bunch of those pieces down, added a little bit more to make it a cohesive story, and then put the author book out, How to Become a Successful Author, late last year, because it was sort of the complement to the
First one. Yeah.
to the first one. The first one is kind of a basic, broad overview, and then if you want to be an author, this is how to take those broad overview concepts and really implement them. And it was hard because I didn't want to rehash everything in the first book, but
Yeah.
I also needed to rehash many things in the first book on some level, because I wanted each to be their own independent experience. So they really do work in tandem. I recommend both books to people. One, obviously, if you're not an author, I recommend the one book. But if you are an author, I recommend both books, because I think together they show a lot of thought and care, and hundreds of interviews, and hundreds of days on the show circuit, and thinking about books, and thinking about building your career, and basically being obsessed with, how to take care of an audience, how to market to an audience, how to find new people for your audience. And so that was it's funny because the second book came out the same week as I relaunched the podcast, and
Yeah.
the first book came out about a month before I canceled the original
Little podcast.
podcast.
So
So basically everything that I did from the end of the podcast to the relaunch of the podcast is encapsulated in that second book, and
yeah.
everything I did from the very beginning of my career to breaking through is encapsulated in the first book.
Oh, cool. I need to get the first book then too. I'm gonna get. I already purchased one, so I might as well purchase the other one and go ahead and read them in order then, because a lot of the stuff you were describing is a lot of the stuff that I'm really getting into interested in the learning as far
Yeah.
as becoming a creative person and then also becoming an author. So speaking about that, what advice would you give somebody who wanted to get into writing? And then, like for me, this is kind of like a personal question. I want to know is what are a lot of the mistakes that you see a lot of first time authors make when they go out there and start looking to publish their works?
So the most important thing that people don't understand is that no single book is going to save you. No one book is going to make you enough money to be able to survive on your own. You need a catalog of books. You need a catalog of a back catalog. Usually accounts for about 50% of an author's career. So it really is on some level about the next book.
Yeah,
But I do think also that people are much too concerned about the next book and they don't fully capitalize on the first book. I've been selling the first volume of Ichabod Jones Monster Hunter since 2014, and it still sells just as well on my table as it did in 2014. It's the same.
yeah,
It sells maybe slightly less, but for the most part, it sells pretty much the same as it did in 2014, and it's the same book for 5 years. So I definitely think that people don't capitalize enough on one book, but they also believe that one book is going to be their career. The
yeah,
the other thing is that usually people don't hire a cover designer know how to write a blurb or hire a proofreader. All of those things are really important. You're judged by the cover of your book and then the blurb of your book and then the first 20, and then people will download the beginning and read a little bit of it, and if they like it they'll buy it or they'll read through on Kindle Unlimited.
yeah,
And so you really need to be cognizant that like your book has to be as good as any other. Your book cover has to be as good as anything else in your genre. You need to do research on what that book cover is going to be. You need to hire somebody who works in that genre because those people need to know that your book is going to satisfy them. You also need to make the tropes of the genre and this is a tough one. So I mean no disrespect when I say this, but
no,
like first books are also going to be considerably worse than any other book that you write.
yeah,
So people also get quite precious on that first book,
yeah,
and they use it in a lot of ways when maybe
uh,
they're don't so you it takes about 10 big projects of some type in writing to like really develop a voice.
yeah,
I didn't really understand that when I first started, and luckily my first several projects that I wrote were not good, but they also were like movies, and so they could
yeah,
never be made, so I didn't have to worry about that. It wasn't until I like got past those first 10 that I even started developing what my voice is, what the genre I liked is, what I like wanted to write about.
yeah,
And so uh don't use the first book as in like the capstone of an entire series, because like the first book is the first book people are going to read
yeah,
in that series. So write a couple of books either standalone or in a shorter series, or if you want to build a universe in a different part of that universe. And then once you've kind of developed a little bit of a voice and you know what you're going to write, then do your dream project. So don't do the dream project first, because you're not good enough to do the dream project yet. Just in many ways, you're
yeah,
still learning how to write
yeah,
a novel and how to entice people, how to make hooks, how to make characters that are 3-dimensional and interesting. But I think those are the three that I would say are the biggest mistakes that people make. The first is like their books just look horrible. Like they just look like, not like
Yeah.
read horrible. They look
Yeah.
horrible.
Yeah.
They don't
Well,
look like they're on genre or on brand. They look like they were done themselves. Instead of hiring a cover designer, it looks like there was no research on the genre that they were written in. Their blurbs don't. Their blurbs are like what the story is, instead of like what a blurb is supposed to be, which is an intoxicating enticement to read the rest of the book,
yeah.
not a summary of the book. Uh, and then their formatting is not up to snuff. They're not using, and there's so many places that you can go to like get free formatting. Draft to Digital, Vellum. Vellum does require like a one-time fee if you have a Mac, but Draft to Digital is free. Publish Drive has ways to format your books. So there's all sorts of ways to format your books for free that makes them, that when someone opens your book, it at least looks good
Yeah.
and it looks the way that that a book should look.
Yeah.
And then a lot of people put way too much faith in a single book.
Yeah.
But a single book is, maybe if you're lucky, someone will spend $20 on that book, which means that there's just gobs of books that need to be sold before you can make a career.
Yeah.
And you make your career through read through of your series. So when you
Yeah.
have a longer series, you can do that. You can like
Yeah.
read, you can get people into the first book and then have them read 5, 6, 7 books. But
Yeah.
one book is not really a good marketing. It's not really good at marketing for marketing you. So I say make 3 or 4 sort of mini series, like 3 books in the same, 3 books with one character in the same universe, and then if that universe works, make another. Make another 3 books, then another 3 books with a different main character, 5 books,
Yeah.
so that you're not committing too much at the beginning to your big thing. But the thing you're looking for is, if you're going to go indie, is a signature series. A signature series is a series that's over 1,000,000 words. So something like 10 to 15 books that you
Yeah.
can just drive traffic through consistently, like that you can send ads that you can always talk about. So one of the mistakes that I made was I had just too many series that I was talking about. I had single books and I had short series and I had all of these things. And so part of the last year, when I'm doing things like this or I'm at a show, is being able to have lanes. So I have like
Yeah.
kind of 3 or 4 lanes. Assuming that you don't want the nonfiction stuff, which is its
Yeah.
own lane. And then I talk about the complete creative. So maybe like one lane is like, if you're here for the creative stuff, go over to the complete creative. And like
Yeah.
that's,
That
we have a
exactly.
whole section over here for
Yeah.
that. But if you want to be involved in my fiction, then usually it's people that like monsters and mythology, and there's 3 options for them. If you're an anthology person, I have an anthology series called Cthulhu is Hard to Spell. It's Gods and Monsters of H.P. Lovecraft.
Mm-hmm.
It's part of an overall monster anthology series that I do. So it's a
Mm-hmm.
monster anthologies. There's 3 of them now.
Yeah.
3 of them
Exactly.
now. And then there's, if you like comics, there's Ichabod Jones Monster Hunter, which is about a mental patient that escapes from a mental asylum and becomes a monster hunter, but doesn't know if he's killing monsters, humans, or it's all in his head the whole time.
Oh
So
wow.
we finished issue 8 of that one, and we're about to start issue 9. So like that's my big comic series. And then if you like books, then there's the Gods verse, which is about basically all gods are real, but they're kind of dicks.
Yeah.
It's about women who take their fate into their own hands. They don't allow the gods to dictate what they've been doing, and they kind of like rise up against the fate that the gods left them, and they kind of fulfill their own destiny. So it's mortal female humans against like living in a world where gods and monsters are real. So those sort of 3 lanes represent my fiction, and
Yeah.
I have a bunch of other stuff that's out there.
Yeah.
I have mystery novel. I have a couple mystery novels. I have a sci-fi novel.
Cool.
I've got some other comic stuff out there, and obviously I've got the nonfiction. But
Yeah.
when thinking about coming onto a show like this or doing any promotion, it's been really important for me to like cut through the noise. And when people are like, "There's too many choices," so
No.
usually when I'm coming onto like a show like this that talks about writing, they're not interested in the comic stuff. They're talking about the novel stuff.
No.
So I almost always talk about the God's verse on a podcast like this, because most people are going to prefer novels to comics,
Yeah.
unless we're on a comic podcast. And if we're on a comic podcast
Yeah.
or I'm launching one of my comics, then I'm talking about Ichabod Jones or Cthulhu is Hard to Spell. Or
Yeah.
if I'm on a horror podcast, I'll probably talk about Cthulhu is Hard to Spell because H.P. Lovecraft is a seminal horror author.
Yeah.
It allows me some dynamic range to talk about one thing or
Yeah.
another, but and then obviously if I'm on a show like this, I'm actually talking about the complete creative more because
Yeah.
that is the nonfiction part of it, and as this show is about interviewing creators
Yeah.
and stuff, probably the people that are listening to this show
Yeah.
are creators.
Creators. Yeah.
So I will often spend the bulk of my time talking about the complete creative, which is what we did today,
Yeah.
and the nonfiction books, because so having the lanes
Available to you.
available and having just a lot of stuff available, but the most important thing is your career is long, and 5 years feels like infinite. It feels
Yeah.
like an infinite amount of time. I remember when 5 years felt like an infinite amount of time, but now, on the other, what did I do in 5 years? So in 5 years, I've written over 20 novels. 5 years ago, I had 4 issues of Ichabod Jones. Now I have 8. I had no anthologies. Now I've got 3.
3.
I had no podcast. Now I've got almost 200 episodes. I've got like 9 courses. I've got all of this stuff now.
Yeah.
And just from working little by little and having little successes and having that drive me to be able to make more and more stuff. But you don't. I think the number one piece of advice for to go back to your original question of
Yeah.
like what happens, like what mistake do authors make, is they rely very much on that one book.
Yeah.
Especially if they're not going to go to shows. Like, it's one thing if someone's giving you $20 face to face, but usually online they're giving you $3 on Amazon
yeah.
or something like that.
Yeah,
So it's a lot harder to make a living off of that. Way harder to make a living off that $3 than that $20.
Yeah.
So just know that your career is many, 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 many books. And if you don't want to write many, 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 many books, that's okay. But you probably will not have a career. And it's okay to not have a career. It's okay to do something as a hobby for the fun of it, not caring that like you're going to make a living on it. Like, I've been fortunate to be able to have a sort of robust career that has courses and podcasting and membership and all these sort of facets in them, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to go to all of these ancillary sources. And one of the reasons that I started doing courses and nonfiction stuff was because it's a lot easier to sell a $500 course to 100 people than to sell a $5 book to 1,000 people or 10,000 people. So the courses is a way that allows me to write at the pace that I write at. But my friends who are doing this are writing and they're only writers. They're writing like 12, sometimes 15 books a year. I'm able to to have the career that I have specifically because of the way that I built my career. It's very sloppy in retrospect, and I would not recommend it. But I had to get into courses because I just wasn't selling enough books.
Yeah.
So nonfiction allowed me to like have a stream of income over here, while I had a stream of income over here. I also own
Yeah.
a Verizon dealership, so I have a stream of income over here. I have novels, I have comics, I have work I get paid to do. I also do marketing for people. So all of these things kind of like combine into one
And
sort of thing.
yeah.
But even I don't have enough volume of book. I don't release enough volume of book to make a living just on my books. I
Yeah.
just don't. Like and they're not in one like long running series or anything. They're so
It's interesting though, because a lot of people want to they will spend money learning about the process than they will about the actual writing in the book and the whole thing about, hey, I got 10 books. But if you tell them I got a course on telling you how to write 10 books, you'd probably make more money doing that, which is pretty incredible. That's why I love doing video streaming, right? This is a lot of people are barely getting into this and starting doing this. And what I'm learning is, though, a lot of people aren't really watching my show. They might not come on all the time or whatever. They might, they'll catch it on the replay or something. They're more interested in how I put everything together. They're more interested in about the process. They're like, hey, how did you do all that? You know?
Yeah, I just ran a virtual conference called WannaCon a couple of weeks ago, and I was getting dozens of messages from people asking me like how I did it. And so I've learned I learned very early on that like the best way to create products was to just wait until people asked me questions about stuff and then
Yeah.
just do that. So I created a 10,000 word blog post about like how to run a virtual conference and I don't plan on like making a course about it, but I could train people how to run a virtual conference. I could get paid to do those things. There's
Yeah.
all sorts of things like the nonfiction side of my business is basically taking things that I've mastered in the running of a creative career and then like productizing it when people ask me too many times about it. So I have 2 Kickstarter courses. I have a Rabid fan base course, which is sort of our signature course. It's how to build a rabid fan base for your work from like 1 to thousands of people, and how to know that the thing that you sell is going to the thing that you're making is going to sell. How to turn random people into rabid fans,
Yeah.
and then how to scale it.
Yeah.
People from podcasting use it, people from music use it, people from books obviously use it, but those things are just like what I learned. Like I could teach anybody in probably how to build a rabid fan base, and I know because I have taught anybody how to build a rabid fan base and how to so like all of the things that I'm learning in the creative field, I'm then productizing over here. So that when people ask me the question of what I do or how I did something, I can always reference it. And I can reference it too. I go back and take my own courses sometimes as well, just to refresh my memory on like my process. Because a lot of times it'll be like a year between when I've done something and I've done it again.
Yeah.
A lot of people ask me about like how to build an email list, and that the main part of my marketing company is building email lists and social media profiles for authors. Like that's a huge part of my business. We made like $40,000 on that part of my business last year just from that one service.
Yeah.
It's always looking for avenues. It's like being an entrepreneur, not just an author, because you're running a business. And so I saw all these things that people wanted to get. They wanted to learn how to build an audience. They wanted to and they want, then also more than that, they want someone else to do it for them. So I knew that like people wanted an audience and they wanted someone to build it for them. And I found a way to like sort of serve that niche. And
Yeah,
And
that's
frankly, like that whole company is run by like a list of mailing list of a subset of a subset of a subset of a mailing list that has 300 people on it. That whole
wow.
$40,000 was basically made from 300 people last
People.
year, as opposed to my big mailing list has 20,000 people on it, and I made more on that last year and this year than that money from that 300 people list. But you can have a very small list that's very powerful at the same time.
Time, yeah, awesome. That's great, man. So one last question before we get out of here. What kind of creative legacy do you want to leave behind? Once you're no longer here on this earth, So what's the one thing you want to leave? What's I guess that was the mask. What kind of legacy you want to leave once your time to your done is on
I
the
would like, if nothing else, I would like somebody to look back at my career and see a relatively unbroken chain of what it means to live a creative life.
yeah
So I would love to have some of my fiction work like transcend into like the lexicon. I think that's I think that's considerably harder because there's just so many people trying to do that. There's very few people who still to this day are trying to like teach other people how to build a creative life or understand what it means to lead a creative life. There's very few people in this
yeah
world who are doing that. So I I would love if some of my work transcended like in the J.K. Rowling way that like things
yeah
transcend their like the words on the page to be a movement. I
yeah.
just don't. They're just
So
so many amazing things. I think that it's hard.
yeah
If people just saw me as either a shining beacon or a horrible warning, I would be very happy.
big.
But I feel like my legacy is going to be on the complete creative side as one of
Yeah
the very first humans in this to start talking about how to how to make a career out
failure.
of this. I've been doing the work of the complete creative since 2010.
Yeah,
So
wow.
I have been doing
Yeah,
panels and writing. I've actually been writing my blog about this subject all the way back to 2007, where I was like dissecting things and trying to parse it out for people. And it's evolved and evolved and evolved and evolved and evolved since then. And this is now almost 15 years
work.
of
Yeah,
of work trying to dissect what it means to be a creative, specifically a writer, but really an overall creative. And if my legacy is simply that somebody can look objectively and say, well, I don't know if I like Russell or I didn't like Russell or I didn't know if his writing wasn't for me, but at least he showed an unbroken chain of what it means to lead a creative life, and I can respect him for that, then I think that would be a pretty good legacy.
awesome. That's a great answer. I love that. So, everybody, thank you for coming on. Check out Russell's work. You can check out his podcast, The Complete Creative. You can also check out his catalog of works. You can go to his website at www.russell. That's RUSSELLHO. I'm sorry, Nohelty. And let me pull it up on the screen so you guys can see it real quick. And just to let you know, you can go check out his website there. That's right under the screen. Russell, that's RUSSELLNOHELTY.com. And to check out his past episodes of the podcast, you can go find his books there. You can find all his catalogs of work. Thank you for coming on, Russell. I do appreciate the time, my friend. Thank
Thank
you.
you for having me.
Hey, no problem. No problem. Anytime. And guys, again, this guy's putting in a lot of the work. So if you're trying to get into writing, man, he's giving you the layout. He's giving you the plan. Go check out his book. I'm gonna go buy the other book today. As a matter of fact, supporting the man when he's especially right now, a lot of authors and creators are having a hard time because we can't do the shows. They can't go out and do the things that they were doing before. So thank you, Russell, for hopping on. Thank you, everybody, for joining. Tomorrow night, we'll be back at 7 o'clock, same time. And I'll go ahead and give a rundown of our guest tomorrow, and I'll start putting all the promotion stuff out there as well. Thank you, Russell. Thank you, guys. Thanks, everybody, for having a good evening. I'll talk to you again tomorrow. Bye-bye.